what determines extraordinary potential or optimal performance ultimately is how well we handle pressure. Because under pressure, most of us implode, most of us break down, most of us don't live at the level that we can live. We almost diminished by the experience. If we were to upskill and improve our capacity, so when things get hard, we get better. When things get hard, we become stable. When things get hard, it makes no difference to how we show up for the world. If we're able to achieve that, the life that we live, it's a vastly different life. It's a superpower. So at the end of the day, your state, how we perceive the world determines our behavior. Our behavior determines our reality. So it's all about managing the states. And you ask the question, how do you do it? Well, how you do that?
Hey, I'm Esther, and you are listening to On Your Own, the podcast for Jewish girls living away from home. Each week, we bring you an inspiring person or message to help you confidently navigate life on your own so you can achieve real growth and independence and take ownership of this foundational stage of your life. For additional resources, tips, and to stay up to date on future episodes, sign up for the On Your Own newsletter, linked below in the description. Looking forward to spending some time with you today. And now, to this week's episode.
Hello, Richard. Welcome to the podcast. We are so excited to have you. We could start with you introducing yourself to the audience, and if you could share a little bit about what you do.
It's wonderful to be here. I'm a performance consultant. I help businesses, I help teams, I help leaders navigate complex times and position themselves effectively in the future. So a lot of what I do sits around or centers around behavior. What behaviors are going to bring strategy to life, and how do we need to show up both individually and collectively. Also an author of 4 books. I have also produced or built an app that's able to measure resilience, emotional well-being, stress perceptions, future preparedness, and other elements like that. Also being a co-developer in a genetic panel, which looks at 13 of the most influential genes in terms of human behavior and human emotional states under pressure, and a few other things as well.
Wow, that's so cool. What's the app called? Is it out? Is it available?
It is. It's a free app. It's called the Stress Code.
Okay, brilliant. I didn't know that. Same name as is that your first book, The Stress Code?
The first book, yes, exactly.
Okay. Brilliant. Amazing. So if we could start by defining stress, I think, so make sure we're on the same page. What is stress, and how is it different than anxiety, which is also a common word that we throw around?
So it's a good question. I think if you have to distill it, stress is basically an emotional, biological response to the experience of being out of control or fearful. And stress is very much centered around the here and the now and what's going on and what's on your plate and all the imposed pressures and the weights on your shoulders and everything in between. That is stress. Anxiety is a little bit different. And depending on where you draw your definition from, anxiety is a biological and psychological response to a perceived threat or perceived uncertainty. It's very much like future-based or future-focused stress. And in anxiety, you have your mind trying to protect you from a future that you can't really control. So anxiety is not quite fear. It's much more vague. It's much more anticipatory. But what's so interesting about anxiety is it's very much a shared experience. So if you look at traditional numbers, the World Health Organization states that 4.4% of the world or the global population will experience anxiety on any given day. But the lifetime probability of anxiety is 1 in 3. So a third of the world's population is likely to experience anxiety. But what I'm seeing, so with the app that I developed 5-6 years ago, I've been measuring emotional states of leadership teams across the board, multiple countries, from the UAE to the US to the UK to Australia to South Africa. And what I found in terms of the prevalence of anxiety within leadership teams, and leadership teams are very future focused, is around a 61.8% prevalence of significant anxiety in those teams. So when I say it's a shared experience, we're all living in this state.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. So stress, on the other hand, is that also a very shared experience? How common would that be as opposed to anxiety? The actual day-to-day load, that feeling of out of control. What have you found?
Uh, I think we're all pretty stressed. That's why I laughed. So if we take the official numbers, half the world's population are stressed on any given day. And as I mentioned, it's an emotion about response being out of control. Half the world's population feels out of control. That's what that number suggests. So the prevalence, I mean, the prevalence is significant. And when I say that statistically half the world's population are struggling with stress, what I'm saying by that is that it's not just I'm stressed. It's I'm not managing my stress. I'm not coping with my emotional experience. I'm not coping where I'm at.
Oh, that's a big distinction. Can you elaborate on the distinction of the very, very common experience of feeling out of control, being stressed versus not managing the stress? What would the difference be?
Well, I feel that so much lends itself, or so much of our ability to stress is pervasive. Every single day, we're subjected to high demands and long working hours and uncertainty about our future and a lack of support in some instances and struggles with our health and being torn between work responsibilities and personal responsibilities and feeling that we don't have enough authority or we don't have enough say in the decisions that are important to us. And if our resources are high and the demands of those stresses are manageable, the stress can be very liberating. It's not good or bad. Stress is a funny thing because it's good and bad.
Hmm.
But it all depends on how well resourced are you in order to cope with what you're experiencing or what you're facing on a day-to-day basis.
Very interesting. So, on an emotional, physiological state, can you have two people who are both stressed, but different things are happening based on whether they do have the resources to manage it or not? Like, are there different things happening in the experience of the stress?
So it's a very, very good question you just asked there. So a couple of years ago, it was actually a little more than a couple of years ago, but at the University of Wisconsin in the US, there was this very expansive study. And the expansive study was over an 8-year period, and it was thousands upon thousands of individuals who engaged in the study. If I'm not mistaken, it's around 28,000 individuals. And what they were looking for was experiences of stress and the effect on a physical level over time. And what they were able to identify was that in life, we generally have those who feel that stress is terrible and bad and it's very destructive. And then you have those who are pretty indifferent. They accept that stress is part of life. And what they found was those individuals who believed that stress was destructive, over an 8-year period of time, exposed to the same stresses as those who didn't have that same perspective or points of view, those individuals had a 43% higher risk of developing a chronic disease or dying prematurely in response to the experience of stress and a negative perception of it.
Wow.
By contrast, those individuals who had the same stresses and the same challenges, but did not have the negative belief system, had less than a 3% increased risk of mortality. Basically, what I'm saying is that one's belief system determines whether stress is good or bad in your life, physically, mentally, and emotionally. But it gets even more interesting. This is where it gets interesting. So from that research, all of a sudden what happens is a team at Harvard are saying, we have to explore this. what happens if we believe that stress is good for us? What happens if we shift this paradigm shift from a conceptual understanding? So what they do is they get 50 people, get them into a room, and it's like an amazing experience because they get divided up relatively randomly. Guys, what do you think about stress? And everyone's putting up, it's bad, it's terrible, I'm indifferent to it. And they start compartmentalizing. And you have one group which is, stress is terrible. And you've got another group which is, no, I get stressed, but we get over it. And the final group was taken to a room. There was a narrative presented to them, and scientific papers showed to the team or showed to the group that stress is the best thing that's ever happened to you. You will excel, you will thrive, you will perform better than you ever have before. Your health is going to be exponentially better. Stress is the answer to life.
Wow.
So now you've got these three groups. One is stress is bad, stress, I'm indifferent, and stress is unbelievable. That's where the best version of me or myself is going to emerge. And they go through stress simulations, all three groups with different beliefs. So that's all. The only difference is belief system. And they look at physical aspects, they look at psychological aspects. And at the end of this assessment or this kind of really incredible experiment, they found that group 1 and 2, the minute there was stress imposed on them, their psychological and emotional performance declined. We all know that. We all have that experience. When there's a lot of pressure in the system, the output or the quality of what we're doing starts to diminish. And they weren't sharp, they weren't clear, their acuity was diminished. Not a good outcome. It was just too much, too overwhelming. By contrast, the group that believed that stress was unbelievable, they actually believed that stress was unbelievable, go into the stress simulation and their performance doesn't hold, it doesn't stay at the level that they entered the experiment, it actually went up. So stress brought out the best.
Stress. That's crazy.
It was just the belief. It's a crazy thing. But this is where it gets even more crazy, because what they were also looking at was what happens physically to us. And when we get stressed, what the natural response to stress is our blood vessels will constrict and our heart rate will go up and our blood pressure goes up. And if you pass a certain age and stage in life, it puts you at risk of heart attacks and strokes. And that's why people who've been stressed for long periods of time typically have that cloud hanging over them. Now, what's interesting is when they looked at the physical characteristics of those individuals who, I think stress is bad, I'm indifferent to stress, what happens is that exact pattern. I feel that stress is bad and I get stressed, my blood vessels constrict, my blood pressure goes up and my heart rate goes through the roof. Now what happens is I look at those individuals who believed that stress was good. And incidentally, the papers that they showed this group in that room were fictitious. It was purely on the belief system. They believed, it wasn't proven, they believed that stress was good. Now they're going to the same simulation and everyone else's blood vessels and blood pressure and everything is constricted and gone up. And this group, remarkably, it's like the most incredible thing, their blood vessels dilated, their blood pressure was completely stable while their heart rate was elevated, which means that the risk of a heart attack or stroke was completely negated. So we're seeing psychological and physiological benefits associated with how we perceive stress. We believe that stress is the enemy. It's not the enemy. I can assure you of that. So we see this powerful influence, but it goes even further. There's a third phase to this, because what happens is this research team is saying, okay, well, this is very interesting. What is stress principally? At the end of the day, we're scared. We're scared we might not deliver. We're scared we're not performing. We're scared that we have too much on our plate. We're scared of the outcomes. We're scared of the consequences. We're scared we might not sleep. There's fear that's an undercurrent in the system, and it's combined with the lack of control or perceived lack of control. So the team of researchers saying, what does fear look like biologically? And there's about 20 variables. Heart rate goes up and blood pressure increases and there's increased blood supply to the arms, immune system's active. There are 20 variables. And there's this definitive, when we are scared, our blood vessels constrict and our blood pressure goes up. Now, what's the opposite of fear? I kind of exploring what's the opposite of fear, what's the opposite of fear, what's the opposite of fear? The
It's a
opposite
good
of fear is
question.
courage. It's courage.
Right.
So they're
Right.
saying, okay, well, what does the biology of courage look like? And they look at these and they find 20 variables, exactly the same as fear, with one difference, one single difference. The biology of courage versus fear. And the single difference is blood vessels dilate. When we experience courage, courage is not something that you either have or you don't. It's not the absence of fear, it's ability to rise above fear. Courage is the ability to rise above fear. The differentiator between fear and courage is blood vessel diameter. The differentiator between blood vessel diameter is how we perceive the challenge. We perceive stress as the opportunity. It gives us the exponential. When I say exponential, it creates 20% more of what we can do and can be. It's a remarkable gift that we've been given. We're seeing it in the wrong context often.
So when you look at the variables of what's happening in our body with fear and courage, everything looks the same except for one thing. Like physiologically, everything is the same except that the blood vessels are either constricting or like expanding, dilating.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
why is that difference important?
They don't understand. We don't know why that's why it's important. I explained earlier. Why it happens, we don't know.
Okay.
But why it's important is that if your blood vessels are constricted and your heart rate's climbing and your blood pressure is high, the risk is heart attack or stroke in response to the pressure that you're under. If your blood vessels are dilated, the risk is mitigated completely.
So your body's reacting the same way to the circumstance, but based on your belief, either you're going to be able to get extra resources and overcome it and be healthy and stable in the process, or the opposite, just based on your belief of what you're confronting.
Based on your belief, stress affects you in different ways. Basically, what I'm saying is that stress no longer becomes a risk in terms of health and emotional compromise and performance compromise if we perceive it as a positive thing. And the reality is that when we are stressed, some very incredible things happen. And what tends to unfold is that within a few seconds or moments, not even seconds, milliseconds of being stressed, we have this surge of adrenaline. There's a 500% spike in adrenaline. And we have our immune system increases activity, like from an activity perspective, doubles, obviously, or not quite doubles, actually a 50% increase in immune activity, which is significant. And then what we see is within a few minutes, 15 minutes or so, we see a surge or an elevation of cortisol, another hormone. So you've got the adrenaline, the noradrenaline, the cortisol, the immune system activity. And we think, oh, this can't be good. It's unbelievable. Because what happens is it makes us smarter, sharper, more energized. It gives us power. It gives us strength. It makes us more cognitively flexible. It helps us learn. It helps us overcome barriers, help us adapt. Ultimately, what I'm saying is that whole recalibration of our physiology, when I mentioned 20% earlier, gives us 20% more acuity, 20% more strength, more power, more endurance. It gives us 20%. And it's an incredible gift. I don't believe that we would have survived our ancestral environment were it not for stress. This axis, this response is extremely powerful. There's no medication. There's nothing that we could take that can give us what the stress axis can give us.
So crazy because somehow we don't see it that way. Like that's not the narrative. I'm thinking of girls who leave home for the first time. The amount of calls I get like from their moms or, just how can we cushion this experience and make it as least stressful as possible? She's stressed. That's bad. How can we set her up with something that will take it down? Where does this belief system come from that stress is bad and needs to be avoided at all costs and we need to be protected from it?
I think it's an entrenched belief system that's kind of emerged across all platforms, from mainstream media to psychology to like everywhere. I really believe that it's a pervasive sentiment. But the reality is that the stress is good and bad. And there's one contingency, and the contingency is duration. So the stress
Okay.
axis was designed to be activated and stimulated in these short, explosive bursts.
Right.
Now and again, short periods, and now short periods could be a half a day. The difference between good and bad stress is duration. At the end of the day, it's duration. So now
Okay.
what's happening is our stress axis is turning on and it's staying on.
Hmm.
And it's staying on not for days, it's staying on for weeks on end because society has changed. Our social dynamics have changed. The world has changed. We're always on. So the experience of a new environment and a new ecosystem, it's very overwhelming, but you're compounding that experience on top of so many other variables. So that's certainly one piece. The other piece is that if stress is an interesting thing because there's stress, which is I'm challenged. I'm pushed a little bit beyond what I'm comfortable doing. Challenge is good. That's anything of consequence in life came through challenge. A degree, marriage, kids, whatever's important to you, anything of consequence came through effort and challenge. And then there's stretch. Stretch is saying, well, challenge is hard, but stretch is someone or something taking me beyond what I believe I can do. And believe it or not, that is good too. Stretch brings the best out of us. So stretch and challenge are positive constructs. And they keep us within this very stimulated but not overwhelmed zone, physiologically speaking. The challenge lies with when we perceive something to be a threat. So it's no longer a challenge. It's no longer being stretched. I feel threatened by the situation. It is overwhelming. It is beyond my tolerance, beyond my resources. So when we feel threatened, that's when stress becomes destructive, as opposed to challenged and stretched. When stress or the axis has been turned on for protracted periods of time, that's where stress has a very disruptive effect. And it has a disruptive effect on our mental and emotional well-being as well as our physical well-being. So mental, emotional, physical, all compromise. From the anxiety and to the depression and the lack of concentration, a lack of focus, and digestive issues and skin issues, and the list can go on and on and on. That's what can happen. So kind of where it puts us or where it places us in terms of how do we manage this better, is shorten the stress experience, like turn it off when we don't need to be stressed. And it's an interesting thing I've just said now, need to be stressed, because we actually need to be stressed a little bit. And at the same time, build your resources so that you don't move into the threat zone, you stay within the stretch and the challenge. And in that way, we can capitalize on all the benefits, the superpowers that stress offers us, but at the same time, not become a consequence of this very active and very powerful biological system that is turned on in a very dysfunctional way.
So the perception of stress can only get you so far in as much as it's within a certain framework of that you're being challenged or stretched and it's for short durations. And when you perceive that as good, then that's like a superpower.
Very much. So it's interesting you say that because in so many things in our life, we're quite strategic. We think about it. So like what I want for my life, I'm going to go to school and I'm going to go and study abroad or learn abroad. And then after that, like I want to get married or I want to build this or build that or start a business or whatever it is. Everything we kind of, even if it's not written in a formal structure, we in our minds, we're quite strategic in terms of the phases of life and the journey that we're on. When it comes to stress, we're not strategic. We're completely reactive. And we're confused in terms of our experience. We think, like, why am I feeling stress? Well, at the end of the day, think about it. So life is uncertain. We don't tolerate uncertainty well at all. In fact, a third of the world's population have a medical condition called an intolerance to uncertainty. We're living in a probably or arguably the most uncertain time in human history. Okay. Not to say there weren't hard times before. There have been significantly challenging times, but it's a very uncertain time. It's a very complex time. So we've got the uncertainty, the complexity. It's pervasive. Then on top of it, we have the noise. The world's a noisy place. You've got geopolitical, socioeconomic. Living in Israel, you feel it. And you've got tech acceleration. Where's tech acceleration going to put everyone? We don't know. There was a research paper that came out a couple of years ago by a team at Oxford University evaluating 702 professions. And what they wanted to do is quantify whether these professions would exist in the future. And what they found was that 47% of these professions won't exist in the future. Yes, new professions will arise. But in the near future, a lot of professions are going to disappear. And that's certainly a worry to everyone. Yeah. And then on top of it, you've got, whether it's professional demands or learning demands, you've got expectations, you've got to fight for relevance. That's all consuming. And you've got expectations placed on you, self-imposed and other imposed. And then you've got family dynamics, and you've got your own personal things that you're going through, whether it's health or whether it's burnouts or whatever it is. You've got your own things. And you kind of layer upon layer upon layer upon layer upon layer of all of these. It's not one thing, it's multiple things that are having this compounded effect. But the biggest challenge in our society today, and why so many people feel stressed, is because we're operating at a pace that we've hardly operated. We've never operated at. It's the speed and volume of information we're exposed to that's probably the most impactful, and I'll explain this. In I think it was a couple of years ago, I can't remember the exact year the study came out, but it was very recent. A team at the University of California wanted to explore and investigate what the average person in the 80s, the 1980s, was exposed to from an information perspective, content. And they kind of do these big, kind of sophisticated mathematical models, and they work out in newspaper terms. If you had to open a newspaper and it was 80 pages, the average person per day was consuming, disseminating, discarding, and sharing around 40 newspapers worth of content a day. It's fairly significant.
Yeah.
But then fast forward to 2007. And in 2007, the average person was consuming 174 newspapers worth of content a day.
Oh.
2007 relative to today was a very different time.
The smartphone had just come out, no?
What's that?
In 2007, the smartphone had just come out, no? Or maybe not even yet.
Yeah, I think the social media platforms had not really fully entrenched. I think the smartphones were around, but the social platforms weren't fully established. But maybe I might be wrong on this. Timelines in terms of technology are not my strong suit. So now if you take the same model, you say, okay, well, where does it put us today? Based on the same model, the same model is saying that based on this calculation, the average person today would be exposed to 522 newspapers, 80 pages in length of content a day, which we cannot manage. And I think this is what we're all starting to feel, is that we cannot manage the amount of information that's coming in. And there's an expert in, a mathematical genius, a guy called Suni Lehman. He's at the University of Copenhagen. And he's made this statement that human beings are pretty much at the edge of their attentional resources. We can't handle much more information. And I think we all feel that. So you kind of take all of these factors in combination, sociopolitical, socioeconomic, geopolitical, the noise, the tech, the complexity, the change, the uncertainty. You've got the family, you've got the career expectations, you've got the speed, you've got the volume, and you put it all in this cluster, it's impactful. And it really is quite sensible as to why half the world's population any given day is not managing that well. But I'll go one layer deeper now. And this is a very important layer because we think our reality is conscious.
What do you mean by our reality is conscious?
So we assume that the words that we hear and the tangibles in life determine our perspectives in life. We assume that conscious interaction is the driving force in our reality. So it's
Like
quite
the people
I'll
I
explain
choose
it.
to talk to and um,
Yeah,
the things I choose to
these
watch.
exactly. So logical and structured engagements and the words we say. We assume our reality is based on that. So when we're having a conversation like that, the words that are being expressed, we're processing that at about 50 bits of information a second. So our conscious reality is operating at 50 bits of information a second. Our subconscious, which is kind of exploring tone and the tensions and the dynamic and the speed and the pauses and the intensity and the emotion behind it. Our subconscious reality is processing 11 million bits of information a second. What I'm saying is that our reality is actually subconscious. The things that are happening around us become our reality. Why are we so stressed? Why am I anxious? There's nothing to be anxious about. The things that are happening around us entrench in or themselves into our belief system, what we believe, how we respond to the world, our emotional states, our preferences, our choices. So much about who we are is built on the world around us that we don't even realize.
I think that's so validating
That's
for young people because sometimes we look at young people and like, you don't have kids yet, you don't have the demanding work. Um, why are you so stressed? And based on what you're saying, that we are subconsciously inhaling, I don't know if there's probably a much better word than that, but
so well
ingesting
put.
all of this, the constant movement around us that's becoming more and more and more, that can lead someone who objectively does not have that many stresses and has been maybe even cushioned from certain things in life to be in a very high state of stress.
Exactly. And, kind of circles back. I went off on a little bit of a kind of detour, just building the case. The case is that in the past, because our subconscious determines our reality, our preferences, our choices, our beliefs, our behaviors, we have to be much more strategic in terms of managing our stress so that we can keep moving ourselves away from threat perceptions into challenge perceptions or stretch perceptions.
What would that look like practically? Like, where do we start with getting strategic?
So we have to understand that to be the master of stress, and this is actually becoming quite interesting now because what, when we look at our performance in life or our ability to achieve great things or live up to our fullest potential, what determines extraordinary potential or optimal performance ultimately is how well we handle pressure. Because under pressure, most of us implode, most of us break down, most of us don't live at the level that we can live. We almost diminished by the experience. If we were to upskill and recalibrate and improve our capacity, so when things get hard, we get better. When things get hard, we become stable. When things get hard, it makes no difference to how we show up for the world. If we're able to achieve that, the life that we live, it's a vastly different life. And
Because
it's
superpower.
not, it's a superpower. So at the end of the day, your state, how we perceive the world determines our behavior. Our behavior determines our reality. So it's all about managing the states. And you ask the question, how do you do it? Well, how you do that, incredibly enough, is looking at it in this kind of modular way. One, stress is not the enemy. If I perceive it to be a negative as a positive, one, I become more courageous. I basically develop or I create the biology of courage. And two, the negative effects have pretty much no impact or bearing on my life from a physical standpoint. And on top of it, I become more competent. I actually perform better under pressure. I change the way I view stress. Stress is not the enemy. Prolonged stress is the enemy, and unmanaged stress is the enemy, but stress is not the enemy. And if I see it that way, mentally and physically, I will kind of thrive and I will do well. So we park that on top of developing courage. And courage is such an essential feature in the lives we want to live. What kind of life do you want to live? I want to live a courageous life. That's where you live your truth. So that's one piece. The second piece is that you have to control it. The issue now is that the stress axis gets turned on. You get an email, it gets turned on. You get a WhatsApp message, it gets turned on. You hear the siren, it gets turned on. It's like everything around you is just cueing the stress axis. So sometimes you need it on. Sometimes you have to get over the hurdle and the obstacle and the barrier and the challenge that is in front of you, and you need the stress. Use it. Or you've got a deadline, or you've got an exam. Use the stress. But when you don't need it, turn it off. You don't need it in the evening. You don't need it at 2 o'clock in the morning. You don't need it before anything's happened in the day. Turn it off. And that kind of brings into opens up this incredible world. This incredible world of capacity. And when I say capacity, it's the ability to govern one's state incredibly effectively with relatively little effort. And I'll explain, the different contexts. So we have stress in the moment. We have stress right here. I'm confronted. I'm nervous, or I'm overwhelmed, or I have a difficult conversation that I'm going to have, or I'm stuck in traffic, or I've just heard a siren, and that immediate stress, and you want to compose yourself. That's one experience you would want to shut off when you don't need it. Then you've got another experience where it's for so long I've been overwhelmed, for so long things have been hard, for so long I've been exposed to these demands and expectations, and I'm depleted and drained. That's another experience of stress. You deal with it differently. And then we have those days. And when I say those days, there's many of these days. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 a year, where we're so overwhelmed that it doesn't matter how we try and manage ourselves, we just can't regulate. And that's managed differently. I'm going to go through the 3 ways in which we can manage ourselves contextually. So in the moment, there's one particular breathing technique that is absolutely off the charts. And that breathing technique is known as the physiological sigh. The physiological sigh, or sometimes known as the cyclic sigh, is or involves an inhale again, and an exhale. I'll do it again. Inhale, and an exhale. And you would do this 3 to 10 times. By doing it 3 to 10 times, you immediately see the world through a different lens. You respond different. You are calm. And it gives you a window of about 5 minutes of calm. It's the most incredible thing. So in those difficult moments, you access the cyclic sigh. Any difficult moment, you can do it multiple times a day. And there's been head-to-heads against meditation, head-to-heads against other breathing techniques. The cyclic sigh wins every time. Inhale.
How long when you're breathing in? It's like 1 second, and then another second, and then like how long is each breath?
It's not about the duration of the breath, it's the depth of the breath. So it's a full inhale, and then another inhale on top of that, and exhale. Hyperinflation of the lungs.
So you're fully breathing in and then fully breathing in again beyond what you thought like.
Exactly. Without, so it's inhale, no exhale. It's inhale, and then another inhale, and then followed by a slow, long exhale. And you can do it while you're having very few people can pick it up. And you'll see it in professional sports. The only thing you'll see in athletes is their nostrils kind of go in a little bit when they do this breath. So it can be very discreet, should it need to be discreet. But it gives you instant composure. It is unbelievable in terms of how it's able to carry over. Probably the most powerful technique.
That is
So
so
the
helpful for
cyclic
everyone
side,
right now, like dealing with
it's called
sirens. The moment you hear a siren, do this breathing.
inhale, exhale, do it 3-4 times, and you're going to regulate your biology.
Wow.
So you'll be much clearer, your decision-making process will be much better, and you'll be much calmer in response to the threat and the challenge. So it's not taking it into threat, it's taking it into challenge and stretch, and we do well there. We then have the scenario where we've been in a difficult situation for weeks on end, normally 10 days or longer, and you're starting to feel very, very depleted and very drained and kind of revved up and not sleeping and wired and tired, probably is the best way to describe it.
Wired and tired.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know that you're going to continue along this vein for some time. You know that's not going to stop. And in this context, what you have to do is you have to create a ritual that no matter how you feel every day, you perform one of several different exercises or activities. So you could do 15 minutes of yoga, take an app, 15 minutes of yoga. You're doing it no matter how you feel. You're doing the yoga. Why? Because the yoga will stimulate the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is a stress off button. So it releases something called acetylcholine and stress turns off. Like that is the power of the vagus nerve. So it could be yoga or it could be meditation, 13 minutes of meditation. You take an app or you go onto YouTube and you take a guided meditation. You follow the meditation and you can be terrible at the meditation. The meditation is still going to work. It's not about being the master of meditation, going into these transcendent states. It's about training your brain to not go off in these different directions and to keep coming back, keep coming back, keep coming back. It's also a vagal trigger. So you can do one of those, or if you have access to a pool, you can get into a pool and just submerge yourself under the water repeatedly. And that'll activate a primitive reflex called the dive reflex. Within a matter of seconds, your stress axis will be turned off. But what's most practical is a certain breath sequence. It's different to the cyclic side. The cyclic side is mainly there to control carbon dioxide and oxygen relationships so that you don't set off the stress axis. Once the stress axis is set off or set in motion, we need a technique to turn it off. And the vagus nerve is the lever. And the next breath, I'm going to take you through it for a moment. The next breath sequence is very much a vagal. So what it involves is an inhale through the nose for 4 counts. So sitting upright, shoulders are back, and you're going to inhale for 4 counts. So it's in through the nose. In, 2, 3, 4. And now you hold, and we're going to hold for 7. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And you're going to breathe out for 8. 2, 3, through the mouth as you did there. 4, 5, 6,
Gone.
7. Okay, so we'll practice it again. So it's a nice
Have to
deep
practice
inhale
it.
through. Okay, so inhale for 4. In, 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And out. 2. We'll do 3 breaths like this. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. In. 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And out. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Last one. In. 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And out. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so there was 3 of these breaths. I mean, how do you feel right now?
Completely different. Like I want to go to sleep.
No, it's a
Like
mad thing.
super
It's
calm.
so accessible. So we've got one technique for the here and the now, the moment. We've got another technique was where it's just so much for so long, and just every day, all you do is you take five minutes out the day, and you do this breath like sequence. That even though it's both through breath, they're actually very, very different, and you must acknowledge that. So now we're thinking, okay, well, when things are very overwhelming, like we're not anxious yet, we're just stressed. There's a lot on the go, and I'm being pulled in a million directions, and the sirens and the raining, and I've got to manage this, I've got to manage that, and I'm not getting on top of this, and the next week's going to be super tough, and I'm feeling a bit run down, and I haven't slept last night, and your system just completely like blows. You can try this breath work, it's not going to work. You can't even sit there. You can try a yoga session, it's not going to work. You can try meditation, it's not going to work. What can you do? And the answer lies in a molecule. It's called neuropeptide Y. Neuropeptide Y is actually, as a molecule, its implications in stress management were discovered at Yale. And it was a guy called Charles Morgan, who was a pioneering researcher. It was actually on the military. And he noticed that individuals who express more neuropeptide Y could handle much more pressure and were much more composed and perform much better in hostile environments.
So this is
So what is
something
this?
that is released in your body, or that you're
It's
taking
released in your
external?
brain.
Okay.
No, it's released in your brain. So you've got to find a way to elevate neuropeptide Y.
Mhm.
So many different ways. There's some supplements you could take that marginally increase it. So we don't have to go there. But the greatest way to alter neuropeptide Y is thermal change. Change your body temperature.
Hmm.
So you're having an overwhelming day, and if you have the luxury of having a bath at home, go and have a hot bath. 20 minutes at 41 degrees. You'll get out that bath, you'll be completely transformed. Transformed. If you have the luxury of an environment where you can cold immerse, where you have a bath, you can fill it with cold water, and you put a little bit of ice in it, you'll have a transformative experience to the extent that you'll have within 3 to 5 minutes, you'll have an 86% shift in state. An 86% shift in state in response to being in that cold environment. You can
You
use
take
heat,
a freezing cold shower?
a freezing cold shower will do the trick, 3 to 5 minutes.
3 to 5 minutes.
You'll feel definitively different. So you have, and there's another, it's a crazy tool. And it was highlighted in my latest book. As it looks bizarre, but it really works. And it kind of fits, it's a funny one because it fits both into this overwhelmed state and modulation, and it fits into these long, arduous weeks where you feel that it just stresses on top of you. And what you do is you take a bowl of water, like a salad bowl, a glass bowl preferably, or a ceramic bowl, and you fill it with cold water. And you then go and get ice, and you pile in a ton of ice. So it's about a third ice, a third cold, 2/3 cold water. And you submerge your face. So you kind of dunk your face in the salad bowl, so to speak, and you hold that for about 30 seconds. And you come out, you catch your breath, you do that another time, you come out, catch your breath, do another time. You will not believe how you transform. You will not. Because what happens with the face is I don't want to get too technical, but the face is very interesting because the face is supplied by the trigeminal nerves. So the trigeminal nerve has a very strong link to the vagus nerve, which is the stress off button, and the heart. So when we stimulate the trigeminal nerve with cold, it recalibrates your entire biology. You will, if you're wearing a device where that you can measure heart rate, you'll see your heart rate plummet, like dramatically come down. If you're measuring HRV, which is another metric of health, you'll see that it will spike, which is a good thing. It's the most simple and remarkable tool that is so accessible. So you can have a cold face immersion, you can have a cold shower, you can have a hot bath. If you have the luxury of a sauna, you can go and have a sauna. But on those overwhelming days, shift your body temperature, use the thermal mechanisms in the body to stimulate neuropeptide Y.
Wow. Wow, that is so interesting. So it's like almost like reverse engineering it, that by changing our biology, we change how we then are able to react to the external environment around us. Because the external environment is also changing our biology. It's like
Exactly. So you change, ultimately, if you change your state, you change your behavior and you change your perceptions. So, the kind of second pillar is you have to control the stress response. You don't have a choice anymore. We don't have a choice. And I can give you some other techniques, which are quite interesting, but let me go to the third category. And the third category is, how do we behave when we stress? And the reality is, when we stress, we become very insular, we become very kind of isolated, we become very distant, we become very snappy, very emotional, very volatile. And we kind of try and work through it ourselves. And it's like an interesting thing, because why would we do that? Why would we, when we're overwhelmed and when we're stressed, we go into a proverbial corner, mentally and physically? And the only reason I can find to explain why we do that is because that's a societal expectation. Society expects us to always be fun and always expects us to be competent and strong and capable and a pillar. Society has these expectations of us. So when we are feeling fragile and vulnerable, what we tend to do is live up to the societal norms and expectation. We disappear. There's nothing that we could do that's worse for us than disappearing. Because when we disappear and we try and handle it alone, we become severely compromised. So I'll kind of dive in a little bit deeper. If you're having a really, really tough day, very, very difficult day, and you're sitting in your bedroom alone, you might be reading, you might be on your phone, you're on your device, whatever you do, you're sitting in your bedroom, and a close friend of yours walks into the room. They don't say anything, they walk into the room. And they sit down on the bed next to you. They don't say anything. What starts happening is the circuits in the brain that govern the emotional centers start to quieten down, and the circuits in the brain that govern our cognitive and rational centers start to engage. So you see this recalibration of neural circuit. That person didn't say a single word. They just sat next to you. And then what happens is that you start noticing that in response to that person just being there in the room, your stress hormone levels start to subside. You have shifts in heart rate, shifts in blood pressure, shifts in HRV, like a whole recalibration physiologically, not just circuits, now physiologically. And if you were to engage with them, engaging is an interesting thing, because they could just like stroke you on the shoulder or pat your back, or they could just kind of hold your hand. Nothing. You start releasing oxytocin. And oxytocin is a molecule that counteracts everything that the stress hormones in excess. And now this person's come in, sat in the room, and you're releasing this oxytocin. Oxytocin is the molecule. It has a courage perspective or courage components. It's a molecule of courage. It's a molecule of fearlessness. It's a molecule of self-esteem and self-worth and self-belief. It's a molecule of connection with people. Oxytocin is the best version of ourselves. And it required someone around us to elevate oxytocin. You go back to our ancestral past. This is quite interesting now, because whenever we handled a threat or a challenge or an adversity, we never did it alone. We wouldn't survive alone. We always needed to band together. When we are together handling challenges and handling threats, we excel. Why? Because oxytocin is the molecule that is built through the social bonding and the social interactions that gives us something we needed, something we've been looking for. So what I'm saying is, the third pillar is, when we feel overwhelmed and stressed, put your hand out. Don't disappear. And there's a Navy SEAL saying that when we feel strong, when you feel on top of the world, you put your hand out and you pull people with you. They're coming with you on this journey. And when you feel weak, you put your hand out and you let people pull you up. And we're not so good at that second part.
Yeah.
And we've got to get better. We've got to get better.
Yeah.
And then the fourth pillar in this strategic model, remember saying that the world is too much right now for most individuals. I'd say for everyone. There's
So like
just too
500
much.
newspapers a day.
522 newspapers a day.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. And we can't cope with it. We can't tolerate that. And yes, we cut ourselves off, and think about how you feel after a Shabbat, and you feel like the cutting everything out was so essential.
Yeah.
But the fourth piece is what we tend to neglect, and that is self-care. When things are challenging and overwhelming and stressful, we don't look after ourselves. We actually start neglecting ourselves. So we exercise a little bit less, and we're not as guarded in terms of watching what we eat. And if we were taking supplements, we might forget to take our supplements. And if we had certain health behaviors, we drop those health behaviors. We'd like absolutely collapse in terms of those disciplines, and invariably lead to burnout. Burnout is I'm very ambitious. I want great things in life, and I'm not looking after myself. That's actually the formula for burnout. So what I'm saying is that you have to be very deliberate, saying that it doesn't matter if I slept 2 hours last night, I'm still going to exercise today. Why? Because this is what I do. And what are you going to do? Yes, I'm not going to go for hill sprints. I'm going to go for a walk, but I'm still going to move. Why? Because this is what I do. And in terms of I had a hard day yesterday. It doesn't mean that I'm going to dive into the sugar and dive into things that I know that are going to make my life a little bit more compromised. I had a hard day, then a little bit tighter on health and well-being elements. And in this way, we can kind of manage this wellness piece. And when we feel vital and well and healthy, we can handle so much more. Our resources are elevated. So as the stress increases, self-care must increase proportionally, not the other way around.
That's so true. That's the first thing to go.
First thing to go.
Yeah. I see that now with the war. So it's a very important reminder. It's actually more important now than it was probably when things were going well. Now we need those extra resources and we need that stability.
Exactly. And you'll see that with extraordinary people, who've achieved extraordinary things in life, is that as the pressure rises, so like the investment in self rises proportionately. And many people rely on us. And it's not just for us. It's not just us showing up for us. It's us showing us for our families, for our friends, for our community. Leading the way, leading by example. And we know that we're living in a very challenging world at a challenging time. So just with that knowledge and with that understanding, we can't not be strategic about stress. Yes, I've got to change the way I see stress, because I will never get over the obstacle or hurdle or the barrier if stress doesn't assist in the process. If I don't learn to control stress, stress will control me. So I'm a user when I need it, and I turn it off when I don't. In terms of feeling overwhelmed and distancing myself from the group, absolutely not. It's not going to happen anymore. I'm not doing that. And in terms of self-care, or lack thereof in difficult times, no excuses. You owe it to yourself, you owe it to your family, you owe it to your community.
This is so powerful and so empowering, because we start, the world really does seem so out of our control, especially right now, for those who are in Israel, but also for those who are not. I know so many people not in Israel who are getting all their alerts on their phone too, to try and, which I don't recommend, but to be able to realize that as much as the external is not always in our control, we have it within ourselves to be able to get those resources and rise above it and utilize it.
And you said something so powerful right now, is control. And what is in our control? The only thing we control is ourselves. That the only thing we can control. We can't even control our families, our kids. We can't control anything. The only thing we can control is ourselves. Okay, so that's control. But we do have influence. So the outcome is not defined. We don't know what the outcome is going to be, but we can exert influence. Influence in community, influence in family, influence in different areas of our life. And we should exert influence.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the area of concern, the things that are completely external, the things we have zero control over. And we've got to let that go. And what we tend to do is try and control the areas of concern. We can't. Let them go. We try and control the areas of influence. We can't. We can't control the outcome. We can influence the environment. And the outcome is the outcome. So when it comes to control, remember, stress is a lack of control. You want to increase your stress, try and control the things that fit in the circle of concern, in those external factors. That's an increased stress. You want to increase your stress, try and control the people you can influence. It didn't have to be a disaster there. Don't influence and let it unfold the way it should, the way it's meant to. So the focus, I guess, in terms of exerting control is solely on ourselves.
Wow, that's such a shift. We usually have it flipped and upside down in that. Yeah, I think that for my listeners, the younger you start this, when, yes, objectively some of the stresses are less, the more you can actually go into, I don't want to say the real world because it is the real world, but into, as stress increases as you do get older, you'll already have those tools built up and have the framework and the perspective shifts that are necessary. So this is such a huge, huge, huge gift. Anything that we didn't talk about that we wanted to address?
I think that there's a couple of pieces, and it's really about making it as practical as possible. So I think we have to understand that there's pressure in the system, and pressure influences state, and state affects our identity. So if we're in a completely dysregulated state, who we are becomes something different to who we want to be. So control your state to reinforce your identity, and your identity determines your behavior, and your behavior determines your performance in any given situation. So we just have to always be mindful of this formula. Is pressure, there's a lot of pressure. If we can control our state, our identity is secure, our behavior is secure, our performance is secure, and the outcome is more favorable. The state piece is quite interesting because, let's talk about anxiety and overwhelm. So there was a 2023 study at the University of California. I love the University of California. They always produce the greatest studies. And basically looked at the technique that I gave you today. Basically, it's any slow, controlled breathing exercise where the number of breaths is 6 or less per minute. You can use any sequence you want, but generally the exhalations are emphasized. In terms of reducing anxiety and stress, there was a meta-analysis that found that it doesn't have an 85% success rate or 85% effective. It's 100% effective in reducing anxiety and stress. 100%. What is it going to take? 4 or 5 minutes. 100%. And then we say, okay, well, breath work's a little hard for me. I don't want to do that. Okay, let's go for something really easy. Meta-analysis, 2002, 2,800 people on music. You feeling overwhelmed, you feeling anxious, 30 minutes of slow, calming music. It doesn't have to be traditional classical. It can be slow, calming, 60 beats a minute or less. You've got a 30% reduction in anxiety and overwhelm. With that, we all know. But do we do that? Do we apply that? It's such a simple tool. And it's easy. You're driving somewhere, just put on a slow, relaxing, calming music. Now we're listening to a podcast, or we're listening to an interview, or we're listening to the news, or we're playing something a little bit more vibey. Slow down. At the end of the day, all of these techniques are about slowing it down, because the world is speeding us up. And if we want balance, we need to consciously slow down. And then, okay, let's take another study. We'll take another study on just natural environments. So the 2023 study, 3,500 people, another meta-analysis. You're having a very, very difficult week, and say, okay, this week really, it's pushed me beyond what I can tolerate. You then say, okay, well, let's go to the beach, or let's go to the mountains, or let's go to the hills, or let's go to a forest, and we're just going to be. We're not going to exercise. We're not even going to walk. We're going to just sit on a bench, or we can walk, or we can do whatever. But the more green the environment, the better. It reduces 1 hour in that environment, reduces anxiety by 84% and stress hormones by 16%.
Wow.
1 hour. But do we do that? No, we get stuck in the same routines. Okay, so let's take something else here. Life is heavy. It's about outputs, and it's about demands and expectations and deliverables. Yeah. But what happens if we say, okay, well, why don't we explore our creative side? What we're going to do is let's commit 2 hours of the week to art, We can paint, we can sing, we can do whatever. You don't have to define it. You can bake as long as it's creative baking. And there's a 2010 Dutch study that found that if you just put 2 hours in the week for creative pursuits, just let you become the author of the narrative. The world's basically authoring our narrative so often. I mean, the truth be told, we actually get to choose. But
yeah, instead of consuming, I'm actually providing something, putting something out into the world.
So now you're the author of this experience. And for 2 hours, you're going to just have fun and you're going to enjoy the experience. There's a 25% reduction in anxiety, a 61% reduction in stress hormones. Why make it hard? If you want to bring in the big guns, the big guns is a particular botanical. It's called ashwagandha. Been used in Ayurvedic medicine a couple of thousand years. And
it's like a supplement. What do you call it?
Yeah, a supplement. Exactly. So it's a supplement, a botanical supplement. And 2024 study is a randomized controlled clinical trial. It was over 60 days. It had a control group. It had 2 different doses of ashwagandha. Basically, a low dose ashwagandha after 6 weeks, so correction, not 6 weeks, 60 days, 2 months, reduced anxiety by 59% and stress hormones by 60%. There's one supplement. You can buy it. It's freely available anywhere, non-prescription. Check if you've got medical issues, consult your doctor. But the reality is one particular strain of ashwagandha is more effective than the rest. So when buying ashwagandha, look out for Shoden ashwagandha. Shoden. Shoden. But there's so many tools and there's so much that we can access. There's so much knowledge out there. We just need to kind of roll up our sleeves and say, I'm the author of this reality. I choose my path. I choose my destination. I'm not an object. I'm not getting thrown around by circumstances. And in order for me to become the subject, yes, I'm going to have to change. I'm going to do things differently. I have the strength to move forward and the courage to adapt. And I've got to be also committed to a new process. I don't have to be overwhelmed. I don't have to be stressed. I don't have to. The circumstances are what they are. If you've moved abroad and you're studying abroad, they're not going to change. It doesn't. If every night you tell yourself, "This is hard. I don't like it. I'm not having a good time. This is hard. I don't like it. I'm not having a good time. This is hard. I don't like it. I'm not having a good time." And what's your reality going to be? It's hard. You're not going to like it. You're going to have a terrible time. Instead, if you say that I've got this, I can do this. I love it. I'm growing. I'm evolving. I'm growing. I'm evolving. I'm growing. I'm evolving. I'm growing. I'm evolving. Different reality.
Different reality. Wow.
That's another conversation, what we tell ourselves.
Right. That comes back to that beginning of like the beliefs that we have around the circumstances. And I'm so excited to put this out. I've had so many girls reaching out to me now, like, and exactly when you say that, kind of like that helplessness of like trying to get out of the country and just so many variables not in their control. And now to take that question of like, what is in my control? And the answer is so much more than I thought before speaking to you, that's for sure. So I'm really excited to put this to practice, and I'm going to make ice now to make my ice bowl. I'm excited about that.
I mean, your skin will glow afterwards as well. But
I'm excited. Wonderful.
Skin and cough.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I appreciate it a lot.
Pleasure.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of On Your Own. If you like this episode or think it will be useful to someone else, please leave us a review wherever you listen to podcasts. I would love to connect with you. If you've got any questions, feedback, or ideas for future episodes, you can email me at onyourownpodcast@gmail.com. See you next week. And in the meantime, happy adulting.